He kept having nightmare after nightmare after nightmare. So, the question we have to ask ourselves is, have we seen the apple fall, like Isaac Newton? Gravity was always there, but nobody noticed it. When we see these natural phenomena, just because we haven't discovered it yet doesn't mean it's not true. This raises the question of whether or not we can prove that God exists, scientifically speaking. And we also can prove that there's something here on the ground that is being generated by some higher power. You may be aware that crop circles recently gave a very important message about 2012. What you may not know is that there is a documented record of crop circles that's over 1,000 years old. This goes back to 815 AD with the Archbishop of Lyon in France. You can see what a cheerful place his office looks like. So this is what it might have looked like when he was writing this edict. The edict was called Against the Foolish Opinion of the Masses About Hail and Thunder. He said that the people believed in cloud ships from Magonia that were flattening crops into circles as a ransom to protect against bad weather. So the people were seeing UFOs that they associated with clouds. They believed that the UFOs were protecting them from storms and from bad weather. They also believed that the UFOs demanded that they flatten these crops as a ransom. The local people started to remove the crops from the crop circles whenever they happened. They would use these crops for pagan fertility rituals. It's very likely that they found that there was a strong, wonderful energy that came off of these crops. And you know what happens in a fertility ritual? Yes, they have sex. Thank you for saying that.
Natürlich haben sie Sex. Vielen Dank.
So, what happens is he had to issue an edict to stop people from taking the crops. Back then, the church also functioned as the government. The farmers were furious because everybody would take all their crops and not pay for it. So this got to be such a problem that the government had to crack down on people taking away the crop circles. And that's 1,200 years ago. In the 12th century, they were called elf rings, a ring of daisies caused by elves dancing. This is a picture from 1880 that I found describing a fairy ring being created. In 1678, this was considered like the daily newspaper. And this was the headline news of the day. What you see here is a picture of a crop circle. And of course, they believed it had been created by the devil. So, the mower asked too much to mow the farmer's crops. The farmer got very angry and said, "I'd rather have the devil mow my crops than you." That night, the farmer's entire field lit up with brilliant white light like it was on fire. A perfect circle appeared in the crops the next morning. And he said it was so neatly mowed that no mortal man could have done it. You can see it appears to be in the shape of two rings. This scientist, Dr. Robert Plot, also made drawings of crop circles. And he also was a paleontologist. This is what he thought was the scrotum of a giant. This is a dinosaur bone, which he thought was actually a set of testicles. I don't know how this is going to translate, but this is quite a boner.
Hoden. Maybe in America.
Maybe in America. Anyway, here are some real drawings of crop circles that he found in the crops around England. And this is 400 years old. You can see it's obviously not just a circle. And here's a perfect square inside a circle. And his ridiculous theory was that there was square wind. Modern crop circle theories to explain this are not much better. He also noticed that the soil underneath these crop circles was much more dry than usual. There was a whitish color that smelled like moldy bread. So of course, as a scientist, the first thing he did was put it in his mouth and taste it. But even though it had a funny smell, he said it didn't taste bad. This was written up in 1686. Dr. Gil Levengood documented exactly the same thing about soil in the 1990s. So this is because in order to build the crop circle, you need a lot of water. The water is what stops the crops from burning. And they have also discovered that large areas of water underground disappear when a crop circle is formed. All those old stones in Europe is part of why crop circles formed there. The extraterrestrials used the energy from the stones to help them build the crop circle. We have an eyewitness in the late 1940s who saw a crop circle form right in front of him. He noticed dirt and particles whirling around in a big circle. In only a couple seconds, a 3 to 4 meter circle with sharp edges was formed. Another sighting happened in 1972, August 12th in Warminster. He heard a noise. He said something seemed to push down the wheat, but pay attention to this. That night the air was completely still, so there was no wind. In front of his eyes he saw a great circle take shape, forced down in a clockwise direction. He heard a high-pitched humming noise, and the crops opened up like an oriental fan. These are some of the earliest type of circles that were formed, just single circles. And then as the 70s went on, you started to get these patterns of 4 circles around one. This also started to happen very frequently, this type of shape right here. This is an ancient pagan symbol of the pregnant goddess. And the symbolic message is that the earth itself is pregnant with a new world. And from here on, you're going to see the most amazing part of this presentation after we have lunch. So this is the first type of symbol that was showing up in the crop formations, which is identical to the ancient pagan symbol of the pregnant goddess. This is our first suggestion that the Earth Mother is giving birth to a new Earth. This one came out a couple years ago. It's a much more direct symbol. Now, in this formation, this is from 1991. You see 3 pregnant goddess figures here. And this actually appeared on a Led Zeppelin box set from 1991. I'm sorry, that's 1990. Okay, this showed up in 1991. It appears that this represents the first dimension, second dimension, third dimension. Notice that you have 3 goddesses with the pregnant bellies all put together, too. So if this is 1, 2, 3, then what's this? That's the new 4th dimension. Now, in this case, some crop circle researchers were thinking about the Fibonacci spiral, and wouldn't it be nice if a Mandelbrot set showed up in the crops? And the very next day, this appeared. This formation showed up in July 1996. A truck driver went by and did not see it in the crops, and 15 minutes later, the farmer discovered it. Professional surveying teams have said it would take 3 days to build this with man on the ground. This is also a fractal called the Julia set. This is a triple Julia set, as you see here, and there's a great deal of geometry inside of it. This is actually how atoms and molecules look when you go deep inside. Geometry is the secret to creation. This is another fractal called the Koch snowflake. Now, some people said, oh, no, that's not a Koch snowflake at all. So the crop circle makers are like, okay, well, we'll give you another one. Do you believe it's a snowflake now? That's much better, thank you. Now, that's obviously a bunch of hedgehogs running around in circles. This clearly shows a magnetic field. And this is not something that could be made by any conventional method that we have available to us. This is one of my favorite ones ever. It's impossible to imagine how difficult it would be to try to recreate this. And don't forget that the stalks are bent, but they don't break. In fact, the crops continue growing while they're on the ground. Are there any crop circles that suggest that we're going through genetic or DNA change? This showed up in 1991, and what you see is a chromosome. But notice that it's broken. That's what happens right before the cell divides. So this is a suggestion of evolution. This crop circle from 96 clearly shows a double helix like DNA. I want you to pay particular attention to this shape right here, because you're going to see that later. We see the same spiral suggested here, but it's now associated with geometry. But less than a month later, look at what happens to the geometry. This is one of the big suggestions that DNA is actually changing. Now check this out. You can clearly see the double helix and the connecting pieces right there.